Welcome to the weekend edition of the Fast 5 Business News by Fear and Greed. I'm Michael Thompson, and hello, Sean Aylmer.
Hello, Michael.
Sean, on weekdays, it's all about the Fast 5, the top 5 business stories in 5 minutes. On the weekend, we still keep it to 5 minutes, of course, but we're going to pick out the biggest business story of the week, the most remarkable business story, a sleeper story, one that's flying under the radar a little bit, and our favourite story. Let's jump straight into it. I reckon there's probably only one truly big story this week, wasn't there?
Yeah, I think it's all about the US political and legal system. Part one of that, what's happening to the candidacy of President Joe Biden after last week's disastrous debate with challenger Donald Trump. His performance was so poor, there's now a growing line of Democrats wanting him to not run. Might be federal politicians, might be state governors. The polls are heading in the wrong direction for Mr. Biden. His age really is the big issue. Media reports, which have been denied, suggest the president himself is reconsidering. Part two to this, the US Supreme Court ruled that presidents and ex-presidents cannot be charged for things they do as part of their core duties. The 6-3 decision was made along ideological lines, with the minority Liberal judges releasing an absolutely ferocious alternate judgment. The decision says presidents or ex-presidents are entitled to at least presumptive immunity from prosecution for all his official acts. The minority decision says the ruling makes a mockery of the principle that no man is above the law. Trump was quick to tout it, saying it was a big win for our Constitution and democracy. Joe Biden, well, he basically said it was the abandonment of a core principle of American democracy. This will have huge ramifications, political, geopolitical, economic, social, legal, for decades to come, not just in the US, but more broadly around the world. Massive story, Michael.
Yeah, huge story. Let's move on to most remarkable. I've got one for us this week, Sean, and I think it's remarkable because it has been a remarkable year in property, right? And start of the new financial year, we tend to look back now at what has kind of happened over the last 12 months. Perth house prices up nearly 24% in 1 year. That is just extraordinary. Brisbane up 16%, Adelaide up 15%, Sydney 6%, Darwin and Canberra 2%, Melbourne 1.3%. These CoreLogic figures are significant because even though interest rates are at their highest level in years, property just seems to keep on going. The quick mention, Sean, there was good news for renters as well this week with the Domain quarterly rent report showing the lowest growth in house rents for 3 or 4 years for many capital cities. Good news in the midst of a rental crisis.
Well, my most remarkable story, Michael, is how big banks are dominating the ASX 200 and what that means for investors. We even got more of it this week with Treasurer Jim Chalmers agreeing to let ANZ buy Suncorp. Now, the financials index is worth 31.5% of the overall market capitalisation of the ASX 200. About a third the value of the ASX 200 are in financials, of which the big banks, throw in Macquarie as well, they're the main shares to buy. Weird thing is, if you're a passive investor, it means you have to own bank stocks. If you're an active investor, there's a risk if you don't own bank stocks. And remember, bank stocks at the moment are highly valued. So will the market do anything this year? Well, not if the banks don't do anything this year. We've seen this in the US on Wall Street with the Magnificent Seven, Microsoft, Nvidia, Tesla, Amazon, Apple, Meta, and Google actually providing most of the oomph for Wall Street. Exactly the same thing is happening in the Australian market. Quite remarkable how quickly this has crept up on us.
Yeah, it certainly is. Let's go on to the sleeper story of the week. Can I nominate one for this, Sean?
Please.
It's going to sound a little bit strange, but I'm putting the big tech companies into the sleeper category because there's actually been a series of stories that kind of demonstrate that these big tech companies are under a little bit of pressure in various places. Example number one, Meta, owner of Instagram and Facebook, threatening to block news from its platforms in Australia, stop local users from sharing links to news articles if the government decides to force Meta to negotiate payments with news organisations. It's already happened in Canada. They've already blocked news in Canada, so it could happen here. Example number two, Google likely to face increased competition for search services on Android devices because the ACCC is forcing Telstra and Optus not to do a deal with Google. Number three, big one here, Google's greenhouse gas emissions have surged 48% in the past 5 years because of the demand for data centers, because AI obviously growing and growing and growing. What it means is that Google's commitment to get to net zero by 2030 is now in doubt. You put all of these together and suddenly you see this kind of tech companies are fighting a whole lot of little battles on a whole lot of different fronts. And I think that's fascinating.
Yes, I agree, Michael. Can I tell you my favourite story?
Yes, please.
How can you not be happy with the tax cuts that kicked in on July 1? Everyone every taxpayer at least is getting a tax cut. There's also an increase in the minimum wage, which affects 2.6 million Australian workers. They're getting 3.75% more. We're also getting changes to paid parental leave. There's a $75 a quarter energy rebate, indexation of welfare payments, superannuation guarantee rises from 11 to 11.5%, more money for retirement. I'm really loving this last week. All sorts of new money coming to be in people's pockets.
Yeah, that is a good news story, Sean. One quick mention of the UK election result. That election was held on Thursday of this week, and the results were pretty clear very early on. Landslide win to the Labor Party. New Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer. Really a reflection and a judgment on kind of 14 years now of Conservative government, revolving door of 5 Prime Ministers, including the sub-50-day term of Liz Truss and the Partygate scandals of Boris Johnson. The new Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, really one of his biggest controversies is he's considered to be a little bit boring. His nickname is No Drama Starmer. Boris Johnson, Sean, once called him Captain Crasheroony Snooze Fest. The fact is, he's actually had a pretty remarkable kind of legal career, recognised with a knighthood. It's going to be a really, really interesting time in the UK, a landslide result.
Yeah, fascinating story, that one.
Indeed. All right, there we go. 5 minutes and pretty much everything you need to know in the world of business. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
We'll be back on Monday morning with the top 5 business stories in 5 minutes. Don't forget to hit follow and join us online on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook and X. I'm Michael Thompson, and this is the Fast 5 Business News by Fear and Greed.